All right. Hey, good morning, everybody. It is Friday morning, June the 25th, 2021. Shabbat Shalom. I hope you're having a great morning. Let me say hello to everybody. In case any of you don't know, whenever you see Joanne Panzetta on there, that's not just a random Panzetta in the world. No, that's my mom. And so I just need you to know, in case there's any confusion, that's my mom. So, because sometimes, anyway, good morning, Mama. I love you. I'm just giving you a hard time, as I'm wont to do. Good morning to Jerry and to Janet. Good morning to Pat and Lori, to the Eddies, to Lauren and Levi and Valor and Haven and Everett, and shalom to Steve. Good evening and Shabbat Shalom to Dayspring. Got challah in the oven, chili on the stove. Sounds, oh man, is it overcast? Like a Scotland overcast evening? That would make me jealous. I'd light candles and make the house smell like cinnamon. All right, well, good evening to you. Shabbat Shalom. Good morning to Ellen and Richard and to Menyan and Rashad. Good morning to you guys. And to Jim and Sarah and Nicole. Good morning to all of you. And Shabbat Shalom to Ruti and to Buenos Dias to Elva. Good morning, Elva, or good afternoon. All right, in Mexico City. You guys get my mom joining me in teasing my mom. Good morning to Jenny and to the Camposes. I hope you're having a beautiful morning. And to Barbara Callahan, and good morning to Kathleen. All right. Well, today we're going to look at Psalm 55 today. Psalm 55, which is a really powerful psalm. Hang on one second. It's a lament. It's a prayer, and it's a place where you find David again in a place of he doesn't know up from down at the beginning of this psalm. He is just ripped apart. Sometimes it feels like, boy, if we wanted to, every day we could find psalms that are where David is crying out to God, and I don't know. This morning as I was starting through this psalm, and it's not my voice, but I can hear I hear this voice, the voice of the crowd, of a sort of an American, at least my experience many times with growing up in the South, sort of, stop your whining, boy, stop your crying. Toughen up, man up. Now, that's not my dad, but that voice of, why are you always complaining? Why are you always complaining? And so even if the thing is, the Lord doesn't say, stop your whining to him. In fact, what he prefers that we take it to him and that we listen to him. That we when we've got the whining and the complaining, and then sometimes not just the whining, but the confusion and the difficulty. And even when it keeps going on and you're in a place of what feels like perpetual darkness, you're in a season of difficulty for a long time. And you begin to feel the pressure to suck it up and just put on a happy face and even just fake it with God. The example that we get in David is one who brings the fullness of his emotions and the reality and the genuineness of that before the Lord, who wrestles with the reality, who doesn't just stuff it all down and say, nope, blessed and, I'm blessed and not stressed and things like that. In the valley, he does say, look, my eyes are fixed on you. I'm going to look to you. And so once again, we find ourselves here with David in the midst of difficulty, in the midst of confusion and pain. And so we begin in Psalm Psalm 55. Hang on one second. Here we go. And it's a contemplative song, or a maskil. It's a lament, a dirge. And he opens up saying, "Give ear, O God, to my prayer." And tefillah is a prayer asking for God's intervention. Palal meaning tefillah, from palal meaning judgment, for God to show up as judge and deal with what's going on. You know, it's kind of like when what you want is for, as a child, when there's conflict, for if you know that you're walking in the right way, you want your parents to come into the room and straighten this out. If you know that you're going to be corrected, maybe you don't want them to come in. But when you're saying, I want what's right, then you want the one who judges to come and intervene, to come and deal with it. And so he says, listen, give ear to my prayer, to my tefillah, and do not ignore my plea for help. And he says, do not hide yourself from my supplications, from my pleas for your graciousness, for your favor. Don't hide from what I need your favor, and I need you to intervene, Lord. Verse 3, he continues, he says, listen to me, Chashav, pay attention to me. I need you to pay attention to me, and I need you to answer me. Listen, pay attention to me and answer me. I am restless in my complaint and moan. And when he says I'm restless, the word is arid, which is, it is a word that means I'm totally, it's a word of disassociation. So restlessness is one way. It can be, in certain cases, it can be I'm homeless. I'm disconnected. I'm ungrounded. I'm floating. There's a sense of total instability in this word. When he says I'm restless, there's a sense of I don't know, up from down, left for right. I don't have, and he says, and so in my, he doesn't actually, he says, in my musing, my complaint, sichi is my complaint, it's musing, but it's in my thoughts and what I'm saying, and I'm muttering and musing, and I'm just disconnected. And then he says, and I'm, in terms of, when it says I moan, it says I'm confused. I'm panicked. That's the language there. Ahima. And it's this, what we see. I remember last week I mentioned this when we went through Psalm 77. There's a mood called first person cohortative, that what it shows is sort of an internal conversation that expresses what I'm doing, what I'm feeling, what I want to do, what I desire. But here he's just saying, I'm like an internal, like I'm confused, I'm panicked. So I need you to answer me, God. So the question is, I mean, David's gone through a bunch of junk. He's faced a lot of things. We don't know where in his chronology this psalm is placed, but he feels completely unrooted. Everything, you know that feeling of, I don't know that I've known this feeling a lot in my life, but I feel like the last year a lot of us have experienced this on some level, of that feeling of everything so many things that they were unquestioned. It's just been a sense of stability, things that I have been a rootedness for us. To have those things removed, and has left us at times feeling unmoored, like what's going on? I need you, and having moments of I'm panicked, I'm confused. But here he says, I'm confused, I'm panicked, and the next verse gives us where that panic is coming from, where that confusion is coming from. He says it's from the voice of an enemy. mikol oyev, from the voice of an enemy. And mipnei, it's from the, here it says because of the pressure of the wicked, but it's in Hebrew it says mipnei akat. So it's from mipnei would be from the face of, or from before, but from the face of. And akah is a glare. It's an oppressive glare. It's someone staring at you and giving you those dead eyes, the oppressive eyes to terrify you. It's sort of this nonverbal communication of oppression. So it's the glare of the wicked, from the glaring face, from the face of the glare of the wicked. I'm confused. I'm panicked, he says, because of the noise of an enemy. There's a sound, there's a voice of an enemy, and there's a stare. There's a stare, the stare in the face of the wicked. And it says, for they thrust trouble on me, or it says, for they're shaking iniquity, twisting over me. They're shaking it over me, is what it says. It's kind of like there's the word is for shaking, which is to wobble, but it's like they're holding it over me. So they're staring at me. Their voice is against me. Their eyes are against me, and there's a threat shaking over my head. And it says, and in anger, bear a grudge against me. Or satam would be to, it's got a strong sense of hostility. So they cherish hostility against me. So so verse 5, he says, my heart shudders within me. And the language for shudders it has to do with writhing, travail, the pains of childbirth, anguish. And so Bakir is in my center, in the inner being, in my mind, is in the midst of me. The way we would say it probably would say at my core. Like my heart is writhing at the very core of my being. At the very center of who I am, my heart is absolutely in travail. And he says, and the terrors of death sweep over me. The dread of death has fallen on me. Verse 6, he continues to describe where he's at. He says, fear and trembling have come upon me. And it really says they have entered into me. So fear and shaking, trembling have entered into me. And horror is the state of it's severe distress. It could the word used here, takseni is my horror toward me, or it would create like severe shuddering. Just I'm just shaking. I'm that kind of terror, where it carries with it that physical. So it says, fear and trembling have entered into me. Terror, horror has enveloped me. It has wrapped me. It's surrounded me. So this is severe. He's dealing with confusion, panic, fear. He doesn't know up from down, left from right. Verses 7 through 9 now turn to sort of, it's a very internal conversation, because he's been expressing where he's at to the Lord. And this is where he's at. And God knows, and yet he's bringing it to the Lord. And so these next 3 verses are, again, all the verbs all used here are that first person cohortative mood that express what I want to do. Here's what I desire. Here's what I'd prefer to do. This internal dialogue. And it says, so I said, oh, that I had wings like a dove. And literally, it says, and I said, who will give me wings like a dove? I would fly away and find sanctuary. That's what I would do. oh, if only I had wings like a dove in the midst of this. I just want to find a way and find a shachan, right? The word mishkan is the sanctuary of the Lord. So shachan is a dwelling, but it's a place of rest. I just want to get out from what's going on here and find rest. Oh, I wish I had wings. I could just fly away. I just fly away. That's what I want to do. That's what I would do. Verse 8, he says, surely I would fly away. He goes, look, behold, hine, I would make myself remote. I would distance myself, right? And that's what I want to just get out of here. I just want to go far away. He says, I would stay in the wilderness, and he uses the word stay like lodge. I'd book a room. I'd book a room in the desert in Bamidbar. That's what I would do. That's what I want to do. And all these, I would remote myself. I would distance myself. I would lodge. I would stay. I'd rent a hotel or just a place, a lodge, a temporary dwelling in the desert. And there's a Selah. I just want out, he's saying. I just want to make myself remote. I want to flee. He says to flee, I just want to take up residence, find a room in the desert. Verse 9, he says, again, he goes, what I would do, you know what I would do? I would rush. I would hurry. I would hurry to my shelter. If I were in the desert, if I could fly away, I would fly. I would hurry to get to that hiding place. I would hurry to my shelter to get away from the rushing wind of the storm. From the rushing wind, from the storm. So there's this swirling wind, this heavy wind, this storm that's coming, and I would just want to fly away to get to it. And then he calls out on the Lord. Verse 10, he says, Lord, confuse and confound their speech. Literally, it's like the first word is bala, which can mean consume, can also mean to swallow. And so when it talks about their it's a word that there's some debate on what it means, but in this context, when it talks about their speech, confound their speech, it uses the word lishon, their tongue. And so in one sense, Lord, make them swallow their tongues, or consume, and it says, and divide their tongues, like confuse their tongues, what they're saying, what they're speaking. Lord, confuse and confound their speech. For I see violence and strife in the city. Or it says, I have seen violence, I've seen contention in the city. And the word for strife also carries with it this idea for legal disputes, quarreling, strife. That in the place where everyone is, in the place where I am, where I want to fly away, in this city, there's strife, there's quarreling, there's violence. It's unsafe. No matter where I go, it's unsafe. In verse 11, he says, day and night they make their rounds upon her walls. Day and night they surround her walls. They walk around her walls. So that which is supposed to keep us safe, that which is supposed to protect us, is all around her walls. The violence and the strife and the contention is all around this place. I just want to get out of here, he's saying. Day and night, violence and strife surround her. And then the problem is, and then he says, and iniquity, va'aven va'amal, iniquity, and va'amal is, he says, and labor or toil or distress. But it's one of the Hebrew dictionaries talked about how this is, amal is labor that's difficult and hard, requiring great effort, implying a possible gain in wealth. So everyone's toiling to get rich. Like that's driving what's happening. This picture of everyone laboring and twisting things in the core of this place. And he uses that in her midst, just like in my core, he said, I'm all twisted, everything is shaking in the very core of me. Well, in the very core of the city, in the very center of the city, in the midst of the city, there's twisting and there's this toil, this relentless toil for more that's in her midst. And then surrounding her are violence. Surrounding her walls are violence and and strife. Verse 12, it says, ruins are in her midst, and the word here is hava, which it's the same exact word. In one case, it means evil desire or evil cravings, wicked cravings. It also means destruction and ruin. They go hand in hand. And so it says, and he uses that in her midst or in her core, in the center of her. It says wicked cravings or destruction, ruin are in her core. And so what you have is, again, that picture of in the center of her, all of this stuff is going on, and she's crumbling, right? There's ruin. It's becoming ruined. The very core of the place where he dwells, that he wants to be a bird and just fly away and go live in the desert. And he'd go as fast as he could, if he could. He continues, he says, oppression and deceit never leave her square, right? And so the word for oppression is tok, which is oppressive threats. So it has to do with oppression, but they're words of oppression. And then the word mirma is deception, deceit, and is connected to kind of a deliberate misleading. There's a deception and a fraud where there's deliberate. You can't trust anyone. So there are words that are oppressive in her, in that will not leave her plazas, will not leave her public squares, the place where people do business, the places where people interact. You can't trust anything, he says. It's full of words of threat and deliberate fraud that don't leave the place where business is happening. Now, this sounds like, obviously, we see this kind of thing, and it sounds like, okay, well, David, what? In one sense, why is this? Yes, it's troubling, but you deal with the wicked, you deal with this kind of stuff all the time. Why is this so grueling? Why is this affecting him like this? And he says in verse 13, we can begin to find why it's left him so unmoored, so uprooted, and feeling sort of homeless and confused and panicked. He says, for it's not, here it says, if it were an enemy taunting me, but it doesn't. It says, for it is not an enemy taunting me, or I could bear it. I could endure it. I could lift that up. If it were an enemy, that were taunting me, mocking me, reproaching, ridiculing me, I can carry that. I can deal with that. That's what I'm used to seeing. There's someone who's against me. I could endure it. If my foe was exalting himself over me, I could hide from him. And again, literally, it doesn't have the if here. It doesn't have it. So it says, for it's not an enemy taunting me, or I could bear it. It's not one hating me, exalting himself over me, right? It's not one of my haters that's exalting. I could hide from him. I could be hidden from those. Verse 14, he says, Vata, but it's you, he says with emphasis. A man like me, Enosh ke'erki, is a man according to a man from my row. It's that word when you put things in rows and in columns. So it carries a man of my station, a man of my equal, a man like me, a man from my column, a man from my row. But not just any man from my column, not just any man from my row. He says, my companion, alufi, it's a close friend, it's a confidant, it's a loving my close friend. And then he says, and here it says my companion and my close friend, but it says my confidant, and the final word where here it translated as my close friend, says yadai, which is the one who knows me, one who from knowing me. This is my close friend who knows me. Like you've known me. If this were them, if these were outsiders, if this was just the world, as it were, I could deal with that. I could bear that up. I'm used to that. But right now, I feel completely like, it's you, he says. It's you. You're one from my row. One of my people. And not just one of my people, but one of my dearest, closest friends that you know me. So which way is up and which way is left and right and up and down? I don't know, he says. He says, verse 15, he says, together we enjoyed. Who together he says, we had the sweetness of this close, confidential conversation we've had together, you and I. You know me because we've had there's the sweetness of, we've enjoyed the sweetness of close, of talking and really opening up our hearts to one another. He says, we used to walk with the throng in the house of God. Literally, it says, in the house of God, we walked among the crowd. Right? So it could even have that picture of we were, because it uses the word yaktav, we were together, we were in unity. It was two of us. We were in unity. In the midst of the crowd, we were walking together in the house of God. Verse 16. It says here, and this is where it says, let desolation come upon them. Let them go down alive into Sheol. Now this sounds harsh, right? Because you're going, this was my closest friend. These were my closest. These are my people. This is a man of my row, of my column. And now he says, let desolation, and the word is shimavet, which is it's the destruction that happens from death. So it's the decay. Something's already dead, and it begins to decay. And that's what you see here. So let that decay, says, come upon them. Let that come upon them. Help me to see that, basically. Let me see let me see on the outside what's actually been going on the inside, because I've been fooled up to this point. That's really what he's expressing here. Let this outer decay reveal itself. Because he says, for evil is in their dwelling among them. And so when it says, because evil in their dwelling, it uses this phrase. It says, be meguram, right? So be is in, and gur is a stranger, an outsider. So be me is from the strangers. Evil is in, from the strangers, from outsiders, in their core, in their midst. There's an evil that's a foreign outside, something that is not of the Lord, something that is from the outside, something that's unfamiliar familiar to me, that has been in the core here, in their midst, dwelling in them. So it says, so let me see the decay of what's actually in their midst. Let the decay come upon them. Let them go alive into Sheol, or let them descend into Sheol alive, because evil, wickedness inside from the strangers is in their core. So now he comes back to an internal conversation with that first person cohortative mood, where he says, verse 17, he says, as for me, and it just says ani, it just says I will, toward God I will call, and Adonai will save me. So he's saying, so he uses that first person, he's like, I intend to call on Adonai. I intend to call on God, he says, He says, I intend to call to God, and Adonai will Yeshua. He will rescue me. He will deliver me. He will save me. Verse 18, again, now he continues to have this internal conversation. Here's what I'm going to do. Here's my intention. He says, every morning or evening, morning, midday, I intend to complain. I intend to mutter. I'm going to be muttering, Lord. I'm going to be complaining evening, morning, and midday. And I'm going to be roaring, moaning here, roaring. That's what I intend to do, Lord. morning, evening, morning, midday, I'm going to be muttering, complaining, bringing it, going back and forth between what I'm thinking and what I'm saying. I'm going to be roaring out. It says, and he will shema my voice. I know that I'm going to, I intend to call on God, and Adonai will save me. Evening, morning, midday, I'm going to moan, I'm going to complain, I'm going to bring my gripe, but he will shema my voice. He will hear and respond. I know that. Verse 19, it says, he will redeem my soul in shalom from the battle against me, for many are striving with me. And it's actually, he will redeem, it says he will redeem or he will ransom in shalom my soul from my battle. From my battle, because many are standing against me. So basically my insights right now, my insights, he says, are they're in the aftermath of a battle. Right? They're shaken. They've been shaking stuff over me. I've been shaken within, terror of death he's talked about, just shuddering, writhing in his guts. And that shaking has left him internally feeling like rubble, feeling in pieces, feeling like he's falling apart. Am I useful to God anymore? I'm going to call on the Lord, and I'm going to moan, and I'm going to complain, I'm going to gripe, and he'll answer me. He'll shema. I know he will. And here's the deal. When he redeems me and when he buys me back, when he ransoms me, he's going to ransom me in wholeness, in peace, in shalom. He's going to put me back together from my war, from my battle, from that which has left me in ruins. Because there have been many, he says, who are standing against me, who have made their stand against me. Verse 20, he says, God will shema, Yishmael, God will hear, and he will humble them. He'll afflict them, yes, the one enthroned of old. He says, even the one whose dwelling is ancient, who's enthroned of old. And then he stops. He will hear me, and he'll deal with them. He'll afflict them. The one who's been enthroned from way before, the ancient one. Selah. Just stop and meditate on that. And then it says, here they don't put the asher, which is important. Here it says nothing changes, but it says with whom there is no change, and when there is no fear of God. So God will hear, and God will afflict them. The ancient one who's been enthroned of old, yes. When he says, in whom there is no change, and when there's no fear of God. He doesn't change, and when there's no fear of God, that's how he'll deal with them. He'll afflict them. He will bring about what is right. Verse 21, the translator here has inserted my companion. It simply continues with, it says, having sent forth, it says, and when there's no fear of God, verse 20, having sent forth his hand against those in shalom with him, defiling his covenant. So the one who didn't fear God, who put forth his hands against those that were at shalom with him, violating, defiling, profaning his agreement, his covenant. That's the one who doesn't fear God. He continues now to talk about this companion that he did talk about earlier, this close friend, the one that's caused him. He's back here and he says, smoother than butter was his speech, right? So, and that smooth, deceptive, the flattery, smoother than butter was his mouth. It says, yet war was in his heart. His words were softer than oil, and or they were more gentle. They were more tender than oil, and than fat. It uses the word for fat, like the oil that's from the fat in the sacrifice and the flavorful. It says, and there's that tenderness of that. It says more tender, smoother than oil were his words. But they, and there's an emphatic they, hema, but they were daggers or drawn swords. And then the psalmist David speaks to us, and he says, Shalach, throw your cares, your anxieties upon Adonai. All your anxieties cast upon him. And here it says he will sustain you, but it says he'll take hold of you. He will seize you. He'll grab you. You say, I'm falling to pieces. I need you. I'm unmoored. Where this is people, my closest friend, I'm people that I trusted. I couldn't see what was in their hearts. So let me see on the outside what's going on the inside, because I didn't know. His words were smooth as butter, but there was war in his heart. And there was oil. It was like oil on, as soft and tender as fat were the things that he said, and yet it was daggers. I give it to you, Lord. Cast your anxieties upon him, and he'll take you, and he'll hold you close. He will never let the righteous be shaken, or it says he will not for eternity give shaking. He will not give shaking or tottering or wobbling to the righteous. That's the literal translation. So it's not for the ages that he's going to give you over to tottering and shaking. He's going to seize you, hold you, cling to you. Verse 24, Va'ata, and you, O God, but you, O God, you will bring them down to the pit of destruction. You will bring them down. They will descend to the well of the grave. Bloodthirsty, deceitful men of bloods, basically men who are who are murderous and full of fraudulent deceit, will not live out half their days. Va'adni, and I will trust in you. He says, I will be confident in you. That's where I'm going to be. You will take care of that. And I'm going to keep moaning, and I'm going to keep bringing it to you. I'm going to keep casting it onto you, and I need you to steady me, because I'm falling to pieces, he says. I need you to steady me, to grasp me, to hold me, and I will put my confidence in you. And that he's the one to whom we fly like a bird. He's our shelter to whom in which we hide. And so when you feel like everything that you've always known or everything you've always held on to is all rattled and all shaken and ungrounded and unmoored, and you feel like you're falling apart, and yet he never changes, and he is faithful. And he calls us to just fix our eyes on him, to keep calling on him, to keep moaning and griping and complaining to him, not to each other, not to everyone else, but bring it to the Lord. Cast your cares upon him because he cares for you. And wrestle it out with him. It's a powerful psalm. It's a powerful psalm of trust and again, teaching us to be honest with the Lord, because we hit those moments where it can feel like everything you've ever thought is turned on its head. And sometimes the disillusionment of that can send you into this place where you feel like I'm panicked, I'm confused, you're having a panic attack. And yet bring it to the Lord and find your shalom. He will redeem you. He'll take your pieces and make you whole in the midst of it and make in through it. Amen? All right. Well, let me say good morning to anybody that I missed. Good morning to Sharon. Good morning, Sharon, and to Sonia and to Margarita. Good morning to you guys. And to Ron and Amy. Good morning, Ron and Amy. And let's see, I think that's everyone here. Let me pop over here and take a look. I think that's everyone. All right. Well, Shabbat shalom. May the Lord bless you and keep you. Oh, don't forget Overflow. Did you put it in the? Okay, so join us for Overflow, and we'll have a chance to take a half hour or so, just talk, catch up, and if you have any thoughts, questions, things you want to share, the link is in the description, and it's also now in the chat. So please join us for Overflow. All right, now may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Shalom, shalom. Have a beautiful day.